Hello guys, this is Paul McWhorter with TopTechBoy.com, and we're here today with episode number 50 in our incredible new tutorial series where you're teaching your Raspberry Pi who's boss. What I'm going to need you to do is pour yourself a nice tall glass of ice cold coffee. That would be straight up black coffee poured over ice, no sugar, no sweeteners, none needed. And as you're pouring your coffee, as always, I want to give a shout out to our friends over at Sunfounder. Sunfounder is actually sponsoring this most excellent series of video lessons. And in this class, we will be using the Raphael kit for Raspberry Pi. Now, by this point, lesson number 50, I hope most of you guys already have your gear. But if you don't, you can look down in the description. There is a link over to Amazon, and you can hop over there and pick this kit up. And believe me, your life and my life are going to be a whole lot simpler if we are working on identical hardware. But enough of this shameless self-promotion. Let's talk about what I am going to teach you today. And this is really sort of a follow-on to lesson number 49 last week, where we started thinking about the frame. We started thinking about the image that we grabbed from the camera. We started thinking about it as a data set. It's a two-dimensional array. It has rows and it has columns, and at the intersection of a row and a column, we have a what? A pixel. And for a color image, that pixel has how many numbers? 3. The first one is blue, the second one is green, and the third one is red. So we sort of have a 3D data structure, and I explained that to you ad nauseum last week. So let's see, for us to kind of jump in here this week, the first thing that I want to do is I want us to kind of just get the camera up and running again. And so what you can do is you can come over here to the most excellent, I guess I'll get out of your way, the most excellent www.toptechboy.com, and then you can search on something like calculating frames per second FPS and OpenCV or overlay. You can search on that there. And then you'll come up with this code. Let's snag that code. I have copied it. Let's see if I can get Bonnie to come up. We'll come up here and we will paste it. And now let's just see if this code will run. So we will run it and boom, there it is. Okay, so this is the software that grabs the frame, shows it, and then calculates the frames per second. So that is all just dandy. That's a great starting point for us. And so we're going to quit out of that. And now we're going to go back and just review a little bit about what we talked about last week. And then we'll be going a lot further today. But just as a quick review, if we come up and we grab a frame, remember last week I showed you real simple little images that I was generating that were just 9 pixels, 3 rows and 3 columns. Well, now let's think about the overall frame that we are working with. The overall frame that we are working with was what? It was display height by display width, right? It's rows, display height, columns, display width. And in this program, what do we have that set to? We have it set to, let me undo that and get out of this. Okay, we had it set to 720 by 1280. And so that was what? 720 rows. Let me get a little further out of your way. Now let me just, I'll put it up here. It is 720 rows and it is 1280 columns. And that sort of makes sense because the picture is wider than it is tall. Now, what we did last time is we came in and we started looking at this corner pixel. Well, what was that corner pixel? It was frame of row 0 and frame of column 0. And then we could go in and we could look at that individual pixel. And then what we saw was a pixel had 3 numbers. Okay, and then we could see what the color strength was of that individual pixel. Now let's think, what if we wanted to come in, and this is something you really have to be very careful about. Let's say we wanted to come in and look at that pixel. Well, what would you think there? What would you think? Let's come over here, and first of all, let's try the first one. Let's look at that upper left pixel. Okay, so we're going to grab, and we did this last week, we are going to come in. We are going to come in and we're going to grab, I am going to, instead of calling that image, I'm going to change that back to frame. And this was frame. It's just, I want to think in terms of frame, and that's what we're doing. And so we're going to change all these to frame. Okay, so our data set is frame now. And I think that's probably all of them. Okay, I might have missed one in there, but we'll fix that if I did. Okay, so now let's just say I want the upper left pixel. So I want to what? I want to print frame, and then I want to print frame row 0 and then column 0 like that. Okay, and now we are going to run this again. I hope it runs. Okay, there it is, boom. And what do you see here? You see that it is blue, green, red, almost no red, a lot of green, and a little bit of blue. And so really, if you look at what looks green to us, there's a lot of blue in that green. Okay, but that's okay. We talked about that last week. Now, let's say I want to look at this pixel down here. Now, what would you think? Tell me what you think that we would look at. You would think that we would look at, what is the row? It is 720. And then what is the column? 1280, because we set that up there like that. Okay, up here, right? So now let's look at that bottom right pixel. And then if I hit run, boom, what do we get? We get an error. Let me make sure you guys can see that. I think my label might be kind of blocking a little bit of what you're seeing. Okay, and then what you see is we got an error. It says 720 is out of bounds. What happened? Somebody tell me what happened. I deliberately made this mistake because this is a really easy mistake to make. And when you go in and start working with that image, you've got to think in terms of that. Let's come back over here. How many pixels tall is the picture? It is 720. We started counting where? At 0. So the last row is what? It is not 720. It is 719. And that explains why we got an index out of range. And so if we want to look at that last row, that last row is not 720, it's 719, and that last column is not 1280, it is 1279, like that. And now if we run it, boom, it's working good. Okay, so what do you have to remember? You have to remember, if you start at 0 and you have 1280 columns, the last column is what? It's 1279. Now, there are just so many times that that problem can come up. I wanted to deliberately make the mistake so that when you see you have kind of like an index out of bounds, that is very likely the mistake that you have made. Okay, so let's come back over to our sketch pad. And so now we're starting to think in terms of not little itty bitty. We're not thinking in terms of little itty bitty pictures, but we're thinking in terms of more like a full frame. Okay, a full frame. Okay, we're thinking in terms of a full frame, and we're thinking in terms of something like 720 rows by 1280 columns, like that. Okay, now this is the thing that I want you to start seeing. Is what we saw is we could investigate any pixel by saying I want frame of the what? The row, and then frame of what? The column. And then that would go to A, specific pixel. But as we start manipulating images, what you really want is you want to snag, or you want to manipulate a given range of the picture. You don't want to have to do it one pixel at a time. And so what we want to see is how can we work with a range in the frame. Okay, and this is how we do it. It is frame, okay, and then we open the bracket, and then what you do is you say, what is the start row? What row do you want to start with? And then you go to the end row, and then you have a comma, and then you go to the start column, and then colon end column, like that, and then close it up. Okay, so this is your what? This is your row range, and then this is your what? This is your column range, and then they're separated by a what? By a comma. So let's say that I wanted to do something with the first 200 columns and the first 200 rows and the first 200 columns. What would that be? Well, I'm going to go from frame, and I want to go from 0. And if I want 200 rows and I start at 0, then I would go to what? 199. And then I'm also going to want to go from the 0 column to what? The 199th column. And then what did I just select? I just selected something like this here. All right. So what if I wanted to turn that red? What I would say is then that is equal to, we've got it down to the pixel level, so I have to give it a what? A pixel. I would say is equal to 0, 0, 2, 55. Because, right, it is blue, green, red. And so that should change the first 200 rows and the first 200 columns to red. Let's jump in there and see if this will actually work. Okay, let's see if this will actually work. So what do? Okay, we already kind of showed you what the problem was here, so we're going to take that out. And now what am I going to do? I'm going to say take frame. Do I want all of frame? No, I just want part of frame. What part do I want? I want from the 0th row to the 199th row, and then comma. I want from the 0th column to the 199th column. And then what do I want to make that? I want to make that all of those pixels are going to become this pixel, 0, 0, 255, a red pixel, like that. Okay, now let's run this thing. And what did it not like? 199 is out of range. What? Okay, I see. I had a typo here. It's from 0 to 199. So it's 0 colon 199 for the rows, comma, 0 colon 199 for the column. So hopefully that was it. And boom, there we are. Look at that. What did we do? We took that corner and we turned it red. Okay, we took that corner and we turned it red. Now I'm going to show you one other little trick. If you are starting at the first row, you don't have to put 0. Just leave it blank and it will start at the first row. Okay, leave it blank and it will start at the first row. Similarly, if you're going all the way to the end row, like say you wanted to go from row 10 to the end, you would put 10 colon nothing. And nothing means go to the end. Why is that important? Because it's so easy to forget what that last row number is. So if you want to go to the end, just say colon and don't put anything there. All right, so it'll work for the first row and the end row. If you just don't put anything in there, it'll start at the first, it'll go to the end. So here it's going to start where? It's going to start at the first row because I left it blank. It's going to go to the 199th row, and then it's going to start at the first row because I left it blank, and it's going to go to the 199th row, and it's going to make that red. So let's just see how that will work. Okay, boom, work the same. Now let's show why that is helpful. Okay, let's say that I want to start at 500 and I want to go all the way to the end. Instead of saying 199, well, I know that the row goes to 720, or is it 719? Okay, but instead of that, I will just leave it blank and it will just perfectly take me to the last one. And then on columns, I'm going to go 500. And then I'm going to go again, don't put anything in there, and it will go to the end. And so where should this box be? It should be somewhere down in the bottom right if we are thinking about this clearly. So let's take a look and giddy up. Okay, look at that. So you see, what you can see is that 500 is, you see, this is 500, which is almost 720. Okay, but then in the column 500 is nowhere near 1280, and that's why it came out not square, is because we're starting out with a rectangular picture. Okay, now what might be interesting, what might be more interesting is what if we wanted to start in the middle? Well, if we wanted to start in the middle, what could I say? It is display, and where do we start? We start with rows, so that would be display height divided by 2. From there, colon, to what? To the end, because I didn't put anything. And then we're going to put, for the columns, we're going to start at the middle, display width divided by 2, and then where? All the way to the end. But now what you have to see is this command wants integers. And if you take a number divided by 2, if display height happened to not be an even number and you divide by 2, you're going to get a float, and then the thing's going to crash. So to be safe, we're going to change that display height divided by 2 into an int just to make sure that it doesn't crash. And then we're going to take an int of the display width divided by 2. Okay, so it's going to start in the middle. And it's going to take all the rows from the, it's going to start in the middle, and it's going to take all the rows from the middle to the bottom. And then on columns, it's going to start in the middle and then go all the way to the end. So what should it be? It should be that bottom right quadrant should be red this time. So let's take a look and see if that works. Boom, look at that. So you see, the right half is red and the bottom half is red. Does that make sense? That is pretty cool. Well, what if we wanted this quadrant up here, the upper right quadrant? What if we wanted the upper right quadrant? Well, let's think about that a little bit. So we want the upper right. So on columns, we're going to want to go from the middle all the way. That doesn't, oh, okay, I'm sorry. The comma is here. So then this is the columns. We're going to want to go from the middle all the way to what? All the way to the right on columns. But then on rows, where do we want to start? And let me just get rid of this whole thing before the comma. Now let's do the rows. We want to start at row 0 because we want that top right quadrant, and so the top is going to be 0, and then it's going to go down to what? Int of display height, because we're dealing with rows, divided by 2, and then close your parenthesis, and that should be that quadrant number 2. What did I do wrong? I must, this was a colon, right? It's from 0 to, okay, like that. And you notice I put 0 in. I didn't have to, but I did. I could just leave it blank since it's the first, but I could do it like that as well. Okay, boom. There it is. Okay, there it is. Now, what if I wanted to go back and I wanted the lower right to be, or let's just take this, okay, because it's a good start. I'm going to copy it, and then I'm going to paste it. And now what if that is, what if we wanted that to be blue, that first one to be blue, and so that would be, no, let's leave it like it is. That's red. What if now I want to make the upper left, I want to make the upper left blue. If I want to make the upper left blue, well, that is going to be row 0. And this time I'll leave the 0 out just because you don't have to put the start or the end in if you don't want. So I start from the start, and then I go to what? I start from the start row and I go down to display height divided by 2. And now on the column, I want to start where? I want to start at 0, okay? But I don't have to put that 0 in, but I start at the start and then to where? Int display width divided by 2, okay? And then close the int. And remember, guys, up here we define that display width and display height. That's where that's coming from, okay? Now I should get there. In that one, I'm going to leave that one red, and then the next one over, I'm going to make blue. So that'll be 255 and 0. So it should be upper left is going to be red, and then upper right is going to be blue if I'm thinking about this right. Ha! Look at that. Whoa, no, I made it green. Yeah, red and green. That's what I wanted to do. I might not have said it that way, but red and green. Now, what if I want the bottom left? What would that be? Well, I could come here and I could say frame, and then it's the bottom, and we start with the rows, and so we are going to start halfway down, which is going to be int of display height divided by 2. So I'm starting halfway down, and then I want to go where? All the way down, so I can just leave the all the way down blank. I don't have to put anything after the colon. Or I could put display height -1, and that would take me to the last row. And then I'm going to go on the columns to what? Well, I want to start at 0, and I want to go to where? Display int of display width divided by 2, like that. And then we need to close the frame like that. Now remember, since we're starting at 0, I don't have to put the 0 in, so I can simplify it like that. Okay, let's see what happens. And I got to give it an equal something. I didn't tell it what it was equal. So that is going to be equal to, I have red, I have green, let's make this one blue. And so that is going to be 255, 0, 0, and then close that pixel. And boom, look at that. I've almost blanked out the whole thing, and you can just see me down in the bottom there a little bit. Okay, that is pretty interesting. So let's stop doing that. What we've been doing is we've been grabbing the frame, and then we've been manipulating the frame. But what I could also do is I could go out and I could grab data from that frame, an area that I'm interested in, and I could call that my region of interest, or ROI. And ROI is going to be equal to the frame. And then what part of the frame do I want to create my region of interest? Well, let's say the upper left quadrant. So how would I do that? Well, it's upper left. So, and I'm going to go ahead and put the zeros in this time just because you can see you can put them in or leave them out. So on rows, I'm going to go from 0 to int of 0 to int of display. Is that how I did it? Disp height, because it's rows, divided by 2. So that would be halfway. Okay. And then where do I want to go to on the columns? I want to go from 0 because I want that upper left quadrant. And then where to? Int of this time display width divided by 2. Now I've got to close the int, and then I've got to close the frame range. And now instead of changing that, I'm grabbing it. I'm not stealing it. I'm just copying it. And then I'm going to make that into ROI. Well, then what could I do with ROI? I could come down here and I could show it. cv2.im show. I want to show ROI. And then what do I want to show? I want to show the data set ROI that I just created. And let's run that. Okay, and boom, you see I have this new window, which is the upper quadrant, which I borrowed from the overall frame. You see how cool this is getting? Okay, now that I have that ROI, what could I do with that ROI? I could put it back over there, but now it's already in the upper left. It's already in the upper left, but what if I also put it down in the lower right? Well, how would I do that? Well, I would say frame, and I want lower right. So what part of frame do I want? I want lower, and I'm starting with rows, so it's going to be the integer of the display height divided by 2. And so that'll start at the middle row, okay? And then I want to go through where? I want to go all the way to the end. And then on the columns, I want to go where? The int of, I want to start in the middle. And so it's going to be the int of display width divided by 2. And then I want to go how far? I want to go all the way to the end, so I can just leave it blank. And now I got to close the frame. Okay. And now what is that going to be equal to? It's going to be equal to ROI. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to borrow it. It'll still be there. And then I'm also going to put it down here in the bottom right. Okay. Let's see what happens. And boom, look at that. Okay. So you see, I borrowed this ROI from right here. I borrowed this ROI from right here. And then what did I do? I went and I put it down here. Does that make sense? That's pretty cool, isn't it? Okay, what else could I do? Well, I could come in and I could say, let's copy this. Okay, so I'm going to copy it. And then I'm also going to put it not just in the lower right, but I'm also going to put it in the upper right. So in that case, I would want to go from where? I would want to start at the 0 row, and I would want to go halfway down. And now it should be here, upper left where it belongs. It should be upper right, and it should be lower right as well. Let's see if that'll work. Look at that. So it is here where it belongs. It is here, and it is here. Well, let's go ahead and put it down there as well. Okay, so how would I do that? I am going to say frame. And this time I want lower. I want it in the lower left. And so where is that going to be? It is going to be the bottom one. So that is going to be integer of display height. Is this right? Yes. So I want it in the lower half. So it's going to be integer of display height divided by 2. And then where do I want it to go to? All the way to the end. Now, what do I want to do on columns? On columns, it is going to go from 0, which I don't have to put in, but I'll put it in. Okay. And then to integer of display width divided by 2, close, and then close the frame. And then that's going to be equal to that ROI that I stole. I borrowed. Okay, like that. What did it not like? Okay, so I've got, I didn't close that frame region like that. Now it should be happy, and we come here. And giddy up, look at that. Okay, so you see, I've taken a part of the frame, and then I filled the frame with that part of the frame. Okay, guys, is this making sense what we're doing? Is this making sense what we're doing? We are able to go in on our main frame and change things in blocks if we want to. Or we can grab something from our main frame, and then we can have a little region of interest over here. Or we can take that region of interest and put it back into the main frame where we want it. Now, what I just don't want you to be confused about is here, if you start at 0, you can tell it's 0 or you cannot tell it's 0. And then if you're coming all the way to the end, you can just leave it blank and it will go to the end, or you could say display width, what? -1, because I showed you that at the beginning. Now, why do I like to leave it blank? Because it's very easy to get that display -1. And so I usually just take advantage of the shortcut and don't put my zeros or my display widths -1 in. Is that pretty neat? I think that is pretty darn neat. So that is really what I wanted to show you today. And then what your homework assignment is your homework assignment is to go in and play around with regions of interest where you grab something, you move it somewhere else, or you could grab something and put it in there. You see, I want you to just start getting comfortable about playing with that frame as a what? Playing with that frame as a data set. Okay. We've done 2 sort of tedious lessons. Make sure you understand these, because we are fixing to just start doing some crazy cool stuff. But for us to do that crazy cool stuff, you have to think of a frame as a what? It is a 2-dimensional data array where at the intersection of rows and columns, you have a pixel. And that pixel has 3 numbers, blue, green, red. You have to understand that. Now, what are we going to do next week? We're going to start getting ready to find and track things in a frame. And we're going to find things and track things on color. But just to set you up for next week, this is the problem. Let's stop all this nonsense that we were doing. Let's stop all this nonsense of the ROI. Okay. And let's just go back and let's look at that frame. I'm just going to print frame of the upper left pixel, which is going to be pixel 0, 0, like that. Okay, now we close it. Let's look at that. Let's look at this. What did it not like? Did I make a mistake? ROI. Okay, I displayed ROI after I took ROI out. So I need to take this out and run it. Okay. Now, what is the problem? We are looking at this upper left pixel, which is the green screen. And then what does it see it as? Blue, it sees as 120. And green, it sees as 160, 170. And red is 0. So that's good. But you see, to me, when I look at this picture, it looks green. It looks green. But to OpenCV, it's green, but there's a lot of blue. It's blue, it's a lot of green. So if I wanted to grab this green, I have no idea because my eye sees green, but OpenCV sees blue and green. So if I wanted to track on this, it would be almost impossible to dial in the numbers based on my intuition of what OpenCV wants. So if I want to track on color, if I want to select something on color, I have to have a different color space where I look at the color a lot more like OpenCV. OpenCV and I look at that color the same. And what that is that's the hue, saturation, and value color space instead of the blue, green, red color space. So if we're going to track something on color, we've got to get something where my eye sees color the same way as OpenCV eyes see color. And where does that happen? That happens in the HSV color space. So next week, I'm going to explain to you what the HSV color space is, how to work in the HSV color space, and then that'll be the third tedious lesson. Then we're going to go in and we're going to start being able to track things on color. I hope that makes sense. Guys, I hope you're being patient with me as I'm going through these fundamentals. Man, I could have just jumped to the fourth lesson and just skipped all of this. And then you could have copied me and you could have pasted it and you could have gotten a cool demo, but you would have never been able to do a project on your own. So going through these three sort of fundamental foundational lessons, when we get to the cool stuff, you're going to understand it and you're going to be able to do it on your own. Guys, I hope you're having as much fun taking this class as I am making it. If you're enjoying it, give it a thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. When you subscribe, make sure you ring that bell and make sure you ring the bell and ask for notifications so you'll know when the future lessons come out. And guys, play around with this. And again, do some homework, play around with it, do cool things with region of interest, and just come up with some stuff on your own and then post it to YouTube as a homework assignment. Link back to this video in the comments. Leave a link over to your homework assignment. And then you guys look at each other's homework assignments and see what people have come up with in playing with this, manipulating a picture as a data set and grabbing regions of interest, changing them, moving around, putting them in different places. Okay, so just sort of play around with it, show that you've done something, and then next week I will explain the HSV color space. Okay, guys, really appreciate your attention. Paul McWhorter with TopTechBoy.com. I will talk to you guys later.